Hey guys, welcome to the Being Beautifully Honest podcast and channel. I really appreciate you being here. Listen, I am super grateful and excited to have NYC lawyer Dmitry here with me today. And I have a link to his YouTube channel as well in the description box. So please go subscribe to his channel, check out his content, amazing content. But this is such a needed conversation because we actually were going to talk about the case and then who knew that within 24 hours it was going to settle? You know what I mean? So, but with that being said, we've just seen a lot of people that have been pretty upset that Sean Combs, Puffy, Puff Daddy, Diddy, Love, whatever he's calling himself these days, settled the case and that they didn't think that he was going to be getting or going to be taking any accountability. So I would really love, because I have a link to the litigation in the description. If you want to go and read it, it has a trigger warning on the first page. It's a lot of graphic details. So we're not going to really go into all of that, but it really is a lot. And I really feel like this is a conversation that really needs to be had because I don't think that some people really get the difference between the civil and the criminal justice system. So, Dimitri, why don't you just go ahead and chime in there?
Sure. So a lot of folks are asking, right? What happens to a potential criminal case if this one is gone? Now, look, technically, the answer is nothing, right? These things are technically, again, not related. In other words, to the extent that a criminal investigation is going on, and we don't know that it's going on, and in fact, we should presume that it's not, right? We can't assume that it is.
Yeah.
That's a probable cause determination that police have to make, that prosecutors have to make. It is unrelated to the civil case. Now, the allegations may be similar, again, assuming there is some investigation. Perhaps evidence may be similar, but this case was closed pretty quickly, right? The only thing we have in this case are allegations. We don't have anything else, no discovery, no deposition testimony, nothing of that sort. So we don't really know anything.
Yeah.
And it's important to keep in mind that those two paths, those two roads are separate from one another.
Exactly. I think it makes sense, but again, I don't think a lot of people really get that. But like you said, the civil has nothing to do with the criminal. So when Cassandra Ventura, via her attorneys, filed this lawsuit for many of us because it was news to us when it came out. This obviously sounds like something that they didn't just decide last week to file a lawsuit, correct?
Well, you know what happened is what I think happened, what seems to have happened, is that after the Me Too movement, a lot of people came out and said, we're out of luck because all these rapes and all these sexual assaults and other forms of bad conduct that happen over the years were statute out. In other words, the statute of limitations has run. And so what New York did and a lot of other places is they created passed legislation, right? Enacted something called the Adult Survivors Act, which is a law that prolongs that statute. And I think that law was about to run. And so they had to file a lawsuit. Otherwise, they'd be time barred from doing that. So I think that's what led to the filing of the lawsuit. It seemed like there were some sort of settlement discussions going on prior to the lawsuit. Obviously, we are not privy to that, but it seems like something was going on, and that may be why they filed a lawsuit.
Yeah, that makes sense because when I believe Sean Combs's attorney made a statement about she had previously tried to get some money and he offered her, a certain amount. She declined it. To me, it didn't sound like she was just trying to shake him down for money or an extortion sort of thing. It to me sounding like there was maybe some talk of, listen, we can try to work this out outside of court. And then if we can't, then we're going to move forward with a lawsuit. So that's what I was assuming
Yeah,
or
I
thinking.
mean, yeah, look, when somebody sues civilly in this country, they want money. There's no other way around that. That
Right.
doesn't mean that they want money in the wrong way. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't get money. That doesn't mean that they haven't suffered or aren't victims. But that's what the system is designed to achieve. There's quite literally no other result that you want if you do that,
Yeah.
generally, particularly in these kinds of cases. So,
Right.
uh, whether or not she's cooperating with authorities or other things like that, we'll see with time. We have to presume, look, even if he were to be charged or indicted, there's still a presumption of innocence. He hasn't been any of those things. So
Right.
there's a real presumption of innocence. I mean, people shouldn't jump to those kinds of conclusions.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, the court of public opinion, which is very loud and boisterous, especially right now. People are going to have their thoughts, views, and opinions on the information that has been released. But like you said, everyone is presumed innocent unless, not just until, but unless proven guilty in a court of law. But also, the lawsuit on the complaint, it lists Sean Combs, his record label, but it also listed Epic Records. And to my knowledge, Sean Combs is not the owner of Epic Records. So, with that being said, does that mean that he and his company, Bad Boy Records, has settled, but it clears Epic Records, or is the settlement including Epic Records? Do you know that
The,
information?
the answer is it depends, right?
Mhm.
You'd have to look at the paperwork to see exactly who was released, quote unquote, right? What a settlement is, it's an exchange of money for a release, right? A document that says that I won't sue you anymore. And then there are a
Correct.
bunch of other provisions that go in there, like confidentiality and other things, which is
Yeah.
also a big part of this, by the way.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so what happened here is depending on who was released. I presume it's all parties. It wouldn't
Okay.
be within anybody's interest to keep this case going. We via partial settlement. I'm assuming it's all parties.
Okay. That's what I was thinking, but I just was wondering, it's like, I saw Epic Records there. Is it just, Sean Combs and his company that's being released, and Epic Records is, possibly still liable, and I don't know if they maybe offer to settle and we just not really hearing about that part either, because the main focus is on that person that has been accused of doing all of
Right.
these things, right? But, you said something that a lot of people really need to hone in on. You said this case, the end goal was always going to result in either her receiving money or not receiving money if it went through and he was found not guilty, right? So, um, this case at least was never going to lead to him being charged criminally and going to, jail, correct?
Well, not directly, right?
Direct,
It's
correct.
possible something would have come out at some point that could
Mhm.
have then been turned over to authorities and
Right.
used as evidence. But authorities can get that anyway. They can get that
Yeah.
voluntarily, or they can issue subpoenas or other things like that. So um, this was never going to directly lead to any
Directly.
criminal consequences. No, of course not.
Yeah. But, one thing I'm thinking, and this is just a thought, um, have you seen or known of any cases in the past where someone brought a civil case against someone and the prosecutors or investigators or whoever caught wind of things and decided to investigate, and that investigation may have led to criminal charges after the civil case?
You do hear about things like that. The problem is it's very hard to know because criminal investigations, aren't public. So you don't know when the investigation started. Did it predate a lawsuit? Did it post-date a lawsuit? But all of these cases that have taken place as a result of the Me Too movement, whether it's Weinstein or Cosby or others, a lot of these had parallel criminal and civil cases.
Okay. And I guess, because of the extent of the things that have been, alleged about what he has done, I would think that this could be similar. Not saying that it's going to lead to anything, but, when you, like you mentioned, Cosby, Weinstein, those had some civil elements and ultimately definitely led to criminal elements as well. So I think some people just maybe need to be patient, pump their brakes, watch and see what happens, because it could possibly lead to more. We don't know if it will, but there's been a lot that has been laid bare that could possibly lead to, maybe an investigation.
Sure. Well, look, if to file a civil lawsuit, just so folks understand, you could file a civil lawsuit in 15 minutes, right? If you file a law, find a lawyer who's willing to do it ethically, right? You can't break the rules of ethics governing lawyers that basically say that you can't file a frivolous case, meaning a case that has no merit.
Mhm.
And the standard for what a frivolous case is very low. It means no basis in law or fact. So
Yeah.
it's easier to file a civil lawsuit than
Mhm.
have effectively convince authorities to start a prosecution, right? Because if the government's going to prosecute a case like this, it's going to cost a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
Number two, they know he's going to hire good lawyers. So they're going to have to cross their T's, dot their I's. It's not going to be an easy kind of investigation where you can neglect things and be careless here and there. And
Yeah.
number three, the standard to convict is reasonable doubt, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt. It's very
Mhm.
high. It's not like in a civil case. A civil case, it's preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, 51%, right?
Right.
In a criminal case, if you're going to indict this guy, you better be sure that you can prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And P. Diddy has been through this process before, right? He's been tried on gun charges in New York years and
Yeah.
years ago. He was acquitted.
Mhm.
He has the same lawyer now that he did back then, right? So
Yeah.
he knows how this process works.
Mhm.
And the government knows that if they're going to go after this case, they better make sure to do their work. And so the
Yeah.
fact that nothing has happened yet doesn't mean anything, even though, again, we always have to err on the side of that presumption of innocence, because otherwise we're kind of in bad shape.
Yeah, you really brought up a lot of great points because one, the cost involved for the government to even move forward with an investigation, and they have to pretty much know that even though they can't say he is guilty, of course, but the money and the manpower and everything they have to put behind that to pursue an investigation and possible charges, that alone is going to cost a lot of money, a load of money. And then you're dealing with someone who, let's just be honest, he's got a lot of power and a lot of money and access, resources, all of those things. And you reminded a lot of us about him being through criminal situations in the past with the gun situation. To be honest, I almost forgot about that, so
Yeah.
that was a great reminder. I think some people may have forgotten about it too. So, yeah, it's just not that simple, and with the law that they put in place, which gave people a pretty short window, I mean, a year is not really a whole lot of time for a lot of people to decide to go in and say, "I need to get in on this statute before it expires." Yeah, it sounds like now was her time to do it or never.
Yeah, and a case like this also, don't forget, just judging from the allegations, and again, those are just allegations, but judging from the allegations, there was a description of a pattern of conduct, right, that lasted a long time, that had very many details about coercion and addiction and other things, very many witnesses, right?
Yeah.
This would be an expensive investigation, right?
Mhm.
And folks are asking, well, he may have contract with some of these people. You can't contract around participation in a criminal case, right? You can't
Yeah.
enter into an NDA and have somebody just say, well, I'm bound to silence. That doesn't work. Otherwise, rich people would just do that all the time, right?
Right.
You can't contract, and in the contract, but you can't, cops come to you, you can't cooperate. That's not allowed, right?
Yeah.
And so all of those things are moving parts. We have to keep in mind that these investigations take a long time. So it may come or it may never come, and that means that we would hope prosecutors did their due diligence, did their work, police did their due diligence, did their work, and figured out there was not enough there.
Exactly. With the civil side being the preponderance of the evidence, like you said, and criminal being beyond a reasonable doubt, um, it sounds like this also was a maybe a safer bet for her to try to go the civil route versus, um, filing a complaint criminally. I mean, we don't know if she did or not, and it just never went anywhere. But a lot of people felt like, well, why didn't she go to the police? Which none of us know that she didn't.
Right.
I mean, we really don't. But also, like you said, because the civil side and criminal side are two completely different things, and also because the bar is a bit lower in terms of finding someone guilty on the civil side than criminal side. It also sounds like this was her best option to get some justice, which the justice comes in the form of money because that's the way it was intended.
That's right. You don't control the victim of a crime. Uh, doesn't control whether or not somebody is arrested or indicted or
Mm,
charged or convicted or anything else, right?
right.
There is due process in place to make sure that the accused is protected, as interesting as that may sound, as funny as that may sound, as counterintuitive as that may sound, right? We just have to rely that the system works. We have to rely on the fact that people do their jobs right, and they don't
Mhm.
always. But
Yeah.
if there's something there, you would hope it'll be pursued, and if there's not, you would hope it won't, rather than people doing things for publicity and things of that nature.
Exactly. I was thinking about a good example of something that went the criminal way first and then it went the civil, which was the O.J. Simpson trial. I mean, almost everyone knows about that situation. He was charged, tried, and found not guilty. And then the family members sued him in civil court and they won. He was found guilty or not guilty, but he was found, I guess,
Liable, liable.
liable, exactly,
Yep.
in civil court. Now, I don't know if they ever got any money from him, but they definitely got the judgment. So I feel like if some people were really looking at the circumstances of everything and they use that case as sort of a comparison, that's something that went the criminal way first. They didn't just believe that OJ, took their family members out and decided to take them to civil court. He was charged, he was tried, he was even in jail for a while, but he was ultimately found not guilty. And so they
Yeah.
sued him in civil court.
The thing is, if you're going to sue somebody civilly, if you're somebody that's planning on being a plaintiff in a civil case, it would
Mhm.
really help if a criminal case came first, right? Because the government will do a lot of your work for you, right?
Yeah.
And the government operates on the government's dime. Whereas if you have to hire a lawyer, that lawyer has to spend money on the case, right? Depending on
Mhm.
the arrangement, how your agreement with the lawyer goes, has to do their own work, right? That's why in this particular case, you're talking about OJ, right? A lot of the work was done. There were some pieces of evidence that I'm sure were introduced at the civil trial that weren't in the criminal trial. It came a few years later, so you had the benefit of that.
Yeah.
But you want the criminal stuff to come first, also because the standard in a criminal case is higher, right? Is beyond a reasonable doubt. So
Yeah.
if there's a conviction or something of that sort, you could then use that in the civil case. There are a lot of legal complexities here. But you don't control the criminal process. You control the civil process. You want to file, you can file. You choose where you file, at least initially, right? Criminal
Mhm.
cases are kind of out of the plaintiff's hands, the victim's hands.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to have all of the majority of that legwork
Yeah,
done before first. But we can only assume because like you said, these are just allegations in the complaint. And it was pretty graphic. I mean, 35-page complaint, that's a
yeah,
lot. And I don't believe that included exhibits of any, sort.
yeah.
So you're thinking it probably was in his best interest to not drag this out much longer than he needed to.
Well, look, what you can assume is that they both determined it was in both of their best interests,
Yeah.
right? That's the only real safe bet here.
Mhm.
Everything else is speculation purely, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Perhaps there are a whole lot of reasons why people don't want to defend civil cases, even if they know they did nothing wrong.
True.
It's expensive and it's emotionally difficult, and it's just the publicity with a case like this would be tough. And so, there are many different reasons. All we can assume with a real degree of certainty is that they both decided that it was the right time to end
Mhm.
this thing right under those terms. That's it. Everything else is pure speculation
Yeah.
until if and when something else happens, and maybe it won't, and the case will die, and that'll be that.
Yeah.
You know?
That's very true. Again, people they get wound up in the emotions of it all, and I don't think that it mattered whether the case settled in 24 hours or 240 days
Right,
because
right.
they said they were both, you know, coming to a place where this was an amicable settlement. And she said in her statement that she felt like this was the best decision for her, where she felt like she had some level of control.
Sure. Absolutely. Because litigation is litigation. You never know where things will go.
Yeah.
And this isn't a case where P Diddy would spare any expense, right? All their T's and all their I's would have to be crossed and dotted, and so they made that decision mutually beneficially. You would think.
Yeah, that's true. So now, with it being settled, I can only assume that this would probably be one where his attorneys would say, "Look, we're settling this. This is with prejudice. You can't come back and try to file another lawsuit, in the future. So this should cover everything." You would think that this would probably involve some sort of agreement where she would not write tell all books or do interviews or, sell her story or things like that. Or do you think she
Yeah.
would still have the right to do that if she wanted to?
I'm assuming there's a confidentiality clause in there,
Okay.
right? I'm assuming. I mean, it
Yeah.
would be silly not to include that because to the extent that this settlement was done in some way to put an end to the storytelling, you want to
Hmm.
make sure that's done in the settlement agreement, right? I would assume that's the case. I would assume that's the case.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's just the way the system works. So it's not essentially her saying, "I'm going to allow you to pay me to be silent about what I went through." This is just the way the laws are made.
Right. Right. A settlement agreement is a contract, right? You can
Yeah.
contract and include in that contract various provisions. And I'm assuming that was one of them.
Yeah. Cuz yeah, it's the some people just were saying things like that. Well, yeah, she's allowing him to pay her to shut up. Well, she said a whole lot in this complaint. Honestly, I feel like that alone speaks volumes. I don't know how much more they really wanted her to have inflicted upon her, going through depositions, having attorneys cross-examine her, asking her, like I couldn't
Right.
imagine if you are a trauma victim, you claim to be a trauma victim, to want people to keep putting you through that, over and
Absolutely.
over again.
And
Yeah.
perhaps that was one of the considerations that she had taken into account.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a consideration that many victims take into account for sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I thought about that, and then I said, "Well, you know what? Not to bring up the dead, unfortunately, Kobe Bryant, who lost his life, a few years back, we know he had a situation where he was actually charged with a situation with a young lady, and that was a criminal situation, but he made some sort of agreement with her and she got some money, and then she decided that she did not want to testify, and so they essentially just decided not to move forward with trying him or pursuing charges against him because she did not want to speak anymore. This situation is definitely not the same, you would say, because she actually did sue and they settled.
Well, and there was no criminal case. There
Well,
was
they're definitely right.
there was an active criminal case, right? Which makes it really dangerous, right? Because you can't, paying off a victim to get rid of a criminal case is really risky. They call that extortion, right? It's not really allowed.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not terribly familiar what was done there, right? A victim could always say, "Look, I just don't want to kind of move forward," and that'll be that.
Yeah.
So it gets really dangerous. If there was a criminal case, it gets really dangerous in how you resolve a civil case, and paying money it becomes problematic, or it may anyway.
Yeah, and I wanna and I'll backtrack a little bit by saying he didn't pay her to be silent, that's not really what I'm saying,
Right,
but
right.
there was some news about a settlement, she got some money, and then she was saying, "Well, look, I don't wanna have anything to do with this anymore, I'm not gonna testify, whatever," and it just made it harder for them to pursue
Absolutely.
this situation, right. So, I think sometimes with this situation, some people are seeing it similarly, and this is a completely different situation.
It's a completely different situation from that perspective. That's
Yeah.
right. If there's no open criminal case, changes the whole game.
Absolutely. Well, look, this was extremely informative. I really hope you guys got something from this because, I mean, people are going to believe what they want to believe. This has really heightened a lot of emotions for a lot of people because some people, it awakens some trauma that they may have experienced in abusive relationships or situations. I know, trust, and believe that that is not an easy thing to experience and then to hear all of these horrible things that she's alleged that she's experienced. You want to see someone, especially when you feel like this is a person of power, to be held accountable, but this was her means of holding him accountable, And, NYC lawyer Dmitry, he definitely broke it down, the difference between civil and criminal. Guys, you really have to understand that this is not a type of situation where she's, just being bought off or being paid off or silenced. This was her case, and they came to a mutually agreeable and amicable settlement that she says she's happy with, and he claims to be happy with. So, yeah.
Appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much. And I hope that this was useful. And I hope to come back soon.
Absolutely. I always appreciate you being here. So thank you guys so much. Please go and subscribe to his channel. Again, a link to his channel is in the description box. And I really appreciate you all being here. So as always, I hope you all enjoyed your time. Subscribe to my channel if you have not already done so. And as always, I just wanted to keep it brief, beautiful. And now I'm going to say bye.